Welcome back. This is Patricia Rose Upczak, and I am reading The Mystery of Devil's Gulch, which is the foundation book of my mystery series for young adults. We are now on Chapter 7. And actually, we're going to read in this segment Chapter 7, 8, and 9. So let's let the saga unfold. Chapter 7. Alice pushed on the unlocked door. The heavy wooden door creaked open, revealing once again the overturned chairs, pulled-out cushions, and empty drawers. Tears welled up inside of me as I fell into the rocking chair and sobbed. I was living in a nightmare that the dawn could not heal. Bear jumped up, pushing his beautiful furry paws and muzzle into my hands, licking the tears off my face. "Rachel, we will find your grandfather," Peter said gently. "I know how hard this is for you." Blue Star handed me a napkin to wipe my face and helped me to my feet as I said, "You are all so sweet, but you can't understand how horrible I feel. If anything happens to my grandfather, my entire family is dead. No one understands." "I do," said Peter as he turned away and started searching through the debris in the next room. Alice suggested that we methodically and carefully go through each room, looking for any clue that might help us. I started the wood-burning stove up to make a pot of tea when Blue Star came down the stairs. "What's that behind the stove?" she asked. Alice came through the door and gasped, "Oh my God, of course!" Before I could say anything, both of them were pulling a small old trunk out from behind the stove. "It's locked," Peter grumbled as he tried to pry open the ancient latch. "Where does your grandfather keep his keys?" he asked. "On the hook by the door," I replied. The endless turning of keys brought us no closer to uncovering the secrets of the locked chest. Impatiently, Peter said, "Let's take it outside and I'll break the lock." Blue Star and I looked questioningly at each other. Peter's attitude had shifted somehow as he worked on the trunk. So Peter and I picked up the chest to carry it outside when Alice exclaimed, "Look!" I jumped and my glasses fell off, and I dropped my end of the trunk. There, deep in the corner of Heceta Head Lighthouse, in dust, cobwebs, and secrecy, lay the key that might unlock the deep mysteries of the past and the present that we needed to know to save my grandfather. We put the trunk down as Blue Star quickly picked up the key. She wiped it off and slipped it into the lock. At first, it resisted turning, and then gave way under pressure of Blue Star's strong fingers. The latch sprang open. We pulled the top up and gazed into the faded, folded rose fabric that lined the inside walls. There were pictures of my grandparents' wedding, and both of them as children. Blue Star came across a relatively new book in comparison to everything else, written by Winston Groom. "What is that?" I asked. It's a book about Andrew Jackson and Jean Laffite, the Battle of New Orleans," she replied. Peter found an old brown leather book with gold lettering on the front. Out loud he read the words, "The Mystery of Skelly Michael." As Peter thumbed through the pages, a yellowed, folded paper fell out on the floor. Blue Star picked it up and gently unfolded it. We sat down at the table and spread the ancient document out on it. My body felt so strange and heavy, I could hear my heart beating in my ears as I gazed at the marks and the writing on the worn piece of paper. "I do believe we've found a pirate's map," Alice said, smiling slowly. Blue Star, Peter, and I looked at it and her with confusion. Then Peter said, "You mean there really is a map and a treasure?" Alice looked up and just nodded her head in a positive but absent-minded way as she studied the ancient parchment. The copper teapot whistled loudly. I had forgotten about the tea. I jumped up, made hot tea, and pulled out some blueberry scones that my grandfather had just made the day he was kidnapped. Tears welled up again. Blue Star put her strong arm around my shoulders and said, "Come on, come sit down and let's begin a journey together." The steam from the teacups curled above the table as we sat together, staring at the foreign symbols scratched onto the paper. The names don't match anything around here, Alice, I moaned. I think we'll have to match the land formations and the coastline and indentations to figure this out. Pretend it's a jigsaw puzzle, replied Blue Star. This map belongs to a Captain Jean something, said Alice. The last name has faded away, and it's dated 1810, I think. Peter laughed. This reminds me of what my dad used to tell me about good journalism and writing. He would always say, answer the questions who, what, where, why, and when. Then he got a sad look on his face as he said he would know how to read this map. Chapter 8. Peter picked up the brown, tattered, leather-bound book and said, I wonder what Skelly Michael is. Alice looked up from the map that she was studying intensely and said, maybe there are more clues in there. The map was hidden inside that book. I was comparing the pirate map to a current coastline map so we could get an idea where everything was in today's perspective. I was fighting with a ball of fear that had my stomach tied up in knots, and I couldn't concentrate on anything. Out loud, I said, this is impossible. We will never figure out where they've taken Grandpa from this thing. Blue Star walked towards me, pushing her beautiful long black hair out of her face. She put her hand on my shoulder and said, calm down, Rachel. We just have to use our brains and figure this all out. Ignore the names on the maps. Let's look for natural landmarks or forms that haven't changed or eroded away. Look, Peter said, that big rock or small island is the same on both maps. Whatever is that compared to here? Where is that compared to here? That's Cape Perpetua, and it's just north of here, near Devil's Gulch, said Alice. Oh, and just south of here are those caves that people go down into to see the sea lions, I said. I cried. Hope began to flicker. Maybe we were on the right track, I thought. Alice leaned over and gave me a hug as she said, honey, you never know where life is taking you until you're there. By itself, this map is meaningless, but I believe it is a clue to where your grandfather's kidnappers are trying to get to. And since we found it in this trunk, we know your grandfather has seen it. So, I said, so that means in order to stay alive, he will probably lead them to one or all three of these big black X's on the map, replied Peter calmly as he smiled at Alice. A flash of lightning and a clap of thunder brought the four tired detectives back to their present predicament. Let's sit down, drink our tea, and look at the mystery of Skelly Michael. It must be in the trunk for a reason, said Alice, as she munched on her blueberry scone. Peter brushed the dust and the cobwebs off the old leather-bound book and turned the first page carefully. Out loud he read the first words of the page. The time is somewhere between sunrise and noon. The place is Skelly Michael Lighthouse off the coast of Ireland. The date is June 18th, 1852, and my name is Jonathan Cavanaugh. About a month ago, I left school eagerly for my summer vacation to sail with my Uncle Philip on his ship. My 15th birthday is coming up in September. Hopefully, I will be strong enough to go home by then. The Atlantic Ocean was smooth as glass that day. My uncle kept pacing back and forth, worried because he thought we were off course. At sunset, we could see what looked like a storm far to the north. The crew of the ship tied everything down. The sea got rough very quickly, and I couldn't keep the gnawing fear of danger away. The ship was being tossed about like a matchbox. That began the nightmare I couldn't wake from. A huge black wave picked our boat up and smashing it against the first set of rocks, cracking the ship in half. In the distance, we had seen the lighthouse to warn off the rocks, but it was too late. My uncle threw me up against a door that had broken and tied a strap to it. He said, "Hold on no matter what happens, lad." Our fate seemed to be sealed as the water washed over everything with a deafening roar. Something cracked me on the head, and I was sure that my life was over. I heard voices calling to me, but it seemed too hard to move or even open my eyes. And then I felt this intense heat on my head, and a rainbow of colors flooded my brain. I heard a gentle voice begging me to breathe, and a booming voice shouting directions as he pulled me out of the water, cutting the tattered strap that held me to the scrap of wood that used to be a door. Bears barking alerted us that somebody had driven up. "Peter, close that up. Put it away quickly, Rachel. Help me push the trunk back in the corner," Alice ordered. "Hello, you all, where are you?" Adam called out. "What are you doing here?" asked Peter. "Well, I could ask you the same question. Didn't Sheriff Johnson lock the place up as a crime scene?" snarled Adam. "Okay, boys, enough sparring," said Alice. "We're all leaving now. Come on, everybody out while there's a lull in the storm." Chapter 9. Alice gathered up her things and almost pushed all of us out the door. She slammed the sturdy old door soundly, and as she locked it, Blue Star said, "Well, only a shapeshifter will be able to get in there now." "What is a shapeshifter?" asked Adam and Peter together. Blue Star and her mother laughed at them. "Now that's a story that will take time, but it's well worth telling. Let's get back to my house for some lunch, and I will tell you all about shapeshifting," Alice said. Alice was a magician in the kitchen. Soon we were all sitting around her large round table, eating mushroom-stuffed ravioli with Italian sausage in a rich tomato sauce and toasted garlic bread that melted in your mouth. "So tell us about shape-shifting," Peter said with a grin on his face. Alice's beautiful large eyes grew very serious as she spoke. "It is a rare individual who can let go of their physical reality or identity. Shape-shifting is the ability to shift a person's identity into the body of an animal, person, or a plant." Adam started to laugh, but a stern look from Blue Star stopped him. His eyes seemed a little softer, and then he turned to Alice. "Alice, have you ever really seen someone change into a mountain lion or a bear?" he asked. "Yes, Adam, I have," Alice continued. To do this, the shaman becomes very still, breathes very deeply. They visualize and imagine an animal or a bird. Peter interrupted. "Any animal? Can you give us some examples?" "Well, yes, that would probably be easier for you to understand." "Thank you, Peter," Alice said with a smile. The shaman visualizes, for example, a mountain lion on the horizon. As she watches, the mountain lion approaches her. "Not very smart, if you ask me. A smart person would run from a mountain lion," said Adam. Alice just looked at him and continued. As she watches, it approaches her. She reaches her hand out until she can touch it. The instant her fingers touch the lion, she enters his body and sees the world through his eyes. At this point, we were all spellbound by the picture Alice was painting. She went on, "It's important in shape-shifting to wait for the animal or bird to approach you. For example, if you wish to shape-shift into an eagle, you must become very still with your eyes closed. You imagine you're on a tall cliff. You reach your hands into the sky. Then the shaman will often whistle and wait until the talons touch her arm. The instant her arms are touched, her spirit moves into the body of the eagle, and she soars over the great canyons and plains with eyes that can see into the hearts of life." Adam's brown eyes had a cynical look as Alice finished up the shape-shifting tale. "You don't really believe that garbage, do you?" He laughed. Blue Star's back straightened as she pulled herself up to her full 5'7" height, threw her head back defiantly, letting her hair whip over her shoulders. "My life has taught me never to even attempt to judge anything or anyone, Adam. You depend on radio and television and computers for everything. You've lost your ability to use your natural senses and your intuition." Blue Star snapped before her mother could even respond. Alice just smiled quietly, apparently undisturbed by Adam's disbelief, and said, "Sheriff Johnson is coming back," just as Bear started to bark at the window. I looked outside and I said, "I don't see anyone." Just as the words were coming out of my mouth, Sheriff Johnson's car came around the corner and towards the house. Well, I'm out of here. He doesn't like me, Adam said while jumping up and grabbing his jacket and hat as he walked out the door. Peter seemed really uncomfortable, his red hair falling in his face as he wiggled around on the kitchen stool he was perched on. All of a sudden, he got up and said, I have to go, Rachel. If I could shapeshift, I'd be a horse. Call me later, and maybe we could do some more snooping around tomorrow. Bye, Alice. Bye, Blue Star. Sheriff Johnson walked up the steps, looked back at Adam as he drove away, and bumped into Peter as he came through the door. Peter, what's the hurry? He snorted. Sorry, Sheriff. I just need to get home. All this stuff is freaking me out, Peter said as he walked through his uncle's house, towards his uncle's house. Considering your background, I would think this is old hat for you, Sheriff Johnson said. What does that mean, Sheriff? Peter asked over his shoulder. It means I want you to stay out of this mess, Peter, Sheriff Johnson said sternly. I'm just a kid, sir. What could I do? Laughed Peter shakily as he walked away. None of this made any sense to me. Blue Star and I just looked at each other as Alice met the sheriff at the door. He walked in and pulled up a chair. Well, our kidnappers have split up. We have 2 vehicles going in different directions, and I don't like the way this is going, he sighed with a weary voice. Thank you for listening, and we will be doing chapter 10, 11, and 12 in the next audio version.